Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Hello, great people of Terminus. Welcome to episode 91 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind, our weekly podcast that aims to keep you informed of the goings-on with Pantheon's development and community. This week, we've got some Pantheon Plus fun. We open our somewhat dusty mailbox, brainstorm about unique gear, and see how the humans fare during the Frail Age. We've got about an hour to kill, so why don't you come and join us? Find the closest couch or chair and get comfortable as me, Desrin, and my accommodating co-host, Theric, bring a plate of Pantheon to you, our lovely listeners. Please enjoy this week's Rewind. So, if I don't say the name of a certain game that just came out that I happen to be absolutely enthralled with right now, does it not count for me to, yet again bring up a non-Pantheon game for the intro? This
week, this week you get an exception. You're allowed this week because the game that we're both playing and we're thinking of Elden Ring right now is worth it. It is a landmark game, I would say. I've never seen it. I'm not one to look at reviews. I'll see a review, but I don't really care. But I've never seen such consistently high scores in terms of reviews from almost everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some critique, but it's been sort of minor things, but it's kind of amazing. It's kind of unheard of that a game has been so well reviewed, and you and I have been playing it, and I think we would say we would agree with those reviews.
So far I am just completely into it, and I was talking to someone, actually a few people now, about the comparisons between some of the philosophies that Elden Ring carries, or From Software, the developer, and how it kind of matches a lot of Pantheon stuff. So it's I wouldn't say I'm playing offline Pantheon, but there are some things, especially when it comes to discovery and mysteries and open world nature, that it sparks the thing that also sparks the thing in Pantheon for me.
A sense of wonder, a sense of wanderlust and wonder and just I'm so at the beginning of this journey into this game, and I'm a Souls game noob. Honestly, it's big blind spot in my gaming sort of history. I haven't played Souls games. I played the first one, but the port to the PC off from console was really not well done, and it turned me off completely. So I just sort of never went back to it. But man, oh man, it is pretty fantastical.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you're into this, and I can't wait to see how it goes with everyone playing right now, and maybe the inspiration that Visionary Realms might find if any of them have time to play.
Well, they're all gamers. They're all gamers. So I imagine at least one of them is.
You couldn't let this one go pass you by with just the explosion of it, But
right, exactly. Yeah, this is kind of one you have to at least try. You know?
Yep. Well, I'm sorry to all our listeners for doing this yet again, right? But I can't help it. It's just, if I had some exciting real life story, I'd be happy to share it. But there's this. This is exciting instead.
This is exciting. This is our life.
You know what really is exciting, actually?
What's that, Desmond?
Our awesome adventuring party.
Oh, you don't say.
We've got yet another, I would say, raid this week. So let's make sure to shout them out before we get into the show.
Yep.
So we've got Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Ziplocks on the Dark Mer Rogue, Jason on the Scar Beardlord, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Redbeard Flynn on the Dark Mer Necromancer, Screech on the Scar Bard, Brian Reck on the Gnome Summoner, Theldrin on the Archive Warrior, Man of Rohan on the Ember Elf Ranger, and Wiki Woo on the Human Enchanter. So
I'm gonna throw in here because WikiWoo is a new member to the party.
Yes.
They joined via the Patreon campaign, and I messaged them asking what their racing class was, their future racing class for Pantheon was, and they didn't get back to me, which is fine. So if you're listening to this, WikiWoo, just shoot me a DM in Discord or message me on the Patreon page with your racing class. I chose Human Enchanter for you because I know you're human. That much I know. And we needed an enchanter. We didn't have any real
I was about to say
control.
you conveniently filled that role.
I did. So when Sleepless, if they spawn some ads, guess what? You're on it there, WikiWoo. So
we got it.
We expect that.
well, thanks again, all you really wonderful people. Every week, we're just blown away by the support of our community. And if you'd like to join our adventuring party, feel free to drop a donation via the YouTube Super Chat feature or check out our Patreon if you'd like another way to support us. As per my usual spiel, we're just here to bring you Pantheon content. And so just having y'all stick around and listen and be a part of chat or comments or whatever, it's the best kind of support. So we appreciate all of that, and thank you again, everyone.
Absolutely.
So now that we've got all that, we got the intro, think it's time to get into the show?
I do believe it is. This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. Okay, well, not much official news from VR about Pantheon this week. They do have the VIP Developer Roundtable going on Friday, February 25th. So look for that interview to become publicly available Friday, March 4th, if they're following their usual schedule of things. We don't have the March calendar of stuff yet from them, but it's just assuming they're going to stick to that schedule. So not exactly news, but a couple notes that some might be worth digging up and talking about here. Now, if you're a Rewind regular, like sometimes VR likes to drop in for the premiere and hang out with us in chat. And last week, we were graced with Adam Tejon Mostel, the production manager for the team, hanging out with us in chat, which is awesome. Totally unexpected and happy to have him there. Not dropping any beans, but, make some comments that just sometimes give a little further context to the discussion that we're having at the time. And I always, it's always great to have that because people pick up on it and then there's lots of conversation that it spawns. So the one that Desrin, we were talking last week about how VR had announced they had introduced 42 additional unique NPC traits and abilities. And this is from the newsletter. And so our discussion started with, wow, that seemed like a lot. And, Adam noted that it's actually a small amount, relatively speaking.
Yep.
And he said it only took maybe 2 or 3 days of work for him in the span of everything else he's doing this month to sort of do that. And does... When you asked, where that number 42 came from, he said, and I'm going to quote it here because it's pretty funny. He says, "It just happened to roll out that way. But for comparison, in the July pre-alpha, I pushed about 100 over 2 weeks, including rudimentary visual effects for all of them. And that was while I was still learning the tools." So he went on to say he's also looking to start really digging into those visual effects probably this coming week. So that was last Sunday. Yes. That means this week he's working on it. So
I'm
that's
really
amazing,
excited
right?
for that because I specifically asked him in the chat about this feature that is fairly recent to Unity called VFX Graph, which if you guys have seen any of the the combat stream from last year, where they show the kind of you would think of it like a flow chart almost, but it's usually called a node graph for setting up NPCs. You could think of it as like kind of a similar thing to that, except for visual effects. And so a super easy tool to use. And it sounds like they are at least looking into using that tool. And I'm just so excited because you could crank out so many cool looking things in such a short time. And I hope Adam really has fun with that.
That's really helpful to bring up because I did see that VFX graphs. I actually didn't know what that meant. I was just boiling it down, simplifying it to just visual effects. So that is very helpful for you to add that in. And it was because you were asking him about it. I was looking back through the chat log, and he's like, you've got him right on the nose with the questions. So really, really good stuff digging that up. But man, oh man, it's just like it seems like so much to do, but it does seem like a pretty fun part of the job too. So I can understand why, it's sort of fun to sit around and come up with all these devious traits for mobs and such, I mean, dreaming them up and implementing them are two definitely different things. But we can look at the newsletter again, and we can see that they've actually got development of additional traits and dispositions is going to be ongoing and will continue into alpha. So, when you're considering this, I really think this is one of the best examples we've heard of because VR says all the time, we've got these tools, right? It's all about the tools. And if we have excellent tools, we can do things really well. This might be like the perfect example of that because this is the level of implementation that you can perform when you're trying to translate these ideas into reality. So if you extrapolate that into other areas of development, it kind of blows your mind. So, I always think of it like, just to boil it down to tools that I'm familiar with, if you have the right hammer, you can drive a lot of nails, so what do you think? Does that sort of ring true with you as well?
Well, I mean, in this case, we're talking about something specific. So when we're extrapolating to like other areas of development, like I get what you're saying. And there's probably truth to that in some capacity because, they've focused on a lot of different tools. It's not just this. But agility of creating content is one of my biggest concerns. And so when we're talking about creating just, traits and dispositions, a very fundamental part of the game. But if it's quite fast and someone can pick it up quickly. Like, let's say they hire another designer, and the tools are easy enough to use. They can just start cranking out stuff as well. So bodes really well for the project, I think. And if they have a ton of tools that are in that same vein where they can, they took the time to get the tool set up so that they can really use it to crank out content. Yes, that is what I'm talking about. That's what this project needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a minor thing, but also a good insight into what their workflow is like. Just always fun to have them around for the chats.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, looking forward to hearing more about these dispositions, abilities, traits for NPCs. That's pretty much the news for the week from VR. We'll come back next week.
Poor Tim, he just comes into chat to just like shoot the spit and we're gonna turn you into a feature on our next.
Wait, anything's fair game, but maybe we should have like a disclaimer at the beginning of the show. It's like, hey, any VR chat and chat, you might be the news next week.
So, poor guys.
I mean, you have no idea. I look around everywhere. I'm looking at comments on their videos. I'm looking for because they respond to some of those. So I'm always trying to find those sources of news that aren't readily apparent. You might not think to look right away, but get lucky sometimes and it comes to you. So, so here at Pantheon Plus, I'll just do a quick update of what we're doing. We like to do these fun community events, and I don't know if anybody else saw it this week, but we put up a video because our sort of event organizer master himself, Drac, is at it again. He's come up with the MMO March Madness, which we're going to be doing. And this is a riff on, obviously, March Madness in the college basketball world, which I'm not even a fan of. I don't know anything about. I mean, other than that it exists.
Yeah, me neither.
Yes, but I mean, I know how brackets work. So, so basically how it's going to work is I'll give you a quick sort of spiel on this. Starting March 1st, we're creating brackets in our Discord. There's going to be daily matchups between sort of, the biggest MMOs that have ever existed. And people will go in and vote for which one they think should win that matchup. And again, then they progress to the next bracket and so on and so forth until we crown a champion of MMO of all time. So it's just for fun. And, we're going to be sort of if you have a favorite MMO, this is your chance to sort of get in there and give it some love and help it proceed to the final stage and win it all. So it's just for fun. But if you want to do that, join our Discord. The link's in the description here. In terms of content from us for the week, you'll see on the screen, we've got our calendar. Monday, CryptFox is playing Lost Ark during the day, and then Drax back for streaming at midnight, doing EverQuest with his pals there. Tuesday is that's when the March Madness kicks off for us, so that's when that starts. And then we're streaming classes for Classes 101. We're streaming Lost Ark on Twitch that evening. We had a lot of fun with it last week. Me, CryptFox, Tetsu, and Stands in the Fire had a good time. And then on Wednesday, I've got my next lore exploring video in development right now. As we said in the intro, we're playing Elden Ring. Trying to do a lore exploring on this game is going to be a little challenging, I have to say. Desrin, you did warn me about this. You're like, oh man, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I got to come up with it. So I got to figure it out. But anyway, see how that goes. Sparrow's playing Elder Scrolls Online on Twitch, 9 p.m. on Wednesday as well. And that's it for the week for us here at Pantheon Plus. So it's also it for this week's VR News and Notes. Mail on a Sunday? That's right. Let's check the mailbox. Okay, so the mailbox is back and it is overflowing since we haven't checked it for many, many moons. And this is where you can ask us our opinions on something Pantheon's doing or just about MMOs in general or anything along those lines. So again, our Discord is where those questions are, where we get those questions from. So if you want to get in on that, join up and you can ask your questions. Anyway, we're gonna clear out the backlog here. We're gonna start with one from our buddy CryptFox. So he said, similar to Final Fantasy XIV, do you think Pantheon should implement a rewards system based on the length of the time a player, member, subscription holder has had their subscription? So for example, 2-month anniversary, in-game fireworks, 3 months, 4 months, etc. Scaling up to different items like that at 6 months where you get even more stuff like vanity items or maybe furniture if there's housing or whatever. That's how Final Fantasy XIV does it. So Desrin, start with you. What do you think? Do you think we should get rewards for being subscribed long term?
Man, I immediately think of the EQ2 system, which is what I'm super used to because over the years, I've logged in every once in a while and then, look over my veteran rewards or whatever they call it. And there's so much at this point, like, having 10 plus year rewards and they've kind of like run out of, like cool things to give you at this point.
Right.
Cause like they've also given out like really gameplay affecting things, like basically like Call of the Hero kind of deals and, massive XP things and AA respecs and just all this stuff that is actually influencing the game. And it's on one hand, it's kind of like nice as a older player to come back into the game and have all these convenience items. But on the other hand, it's like, again, treating it like a dead game, man. Like they're only expecting people to play that have been around a long time. Because if you just started, like you wouldn't have all of these extremely common things with the player base now. And it's just, so in general, I don't really like it, honestly. I think the reward for paying the subscription should be playing the game. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a similar mind, but maybe more in favor of it than you are, I guess. It depends on what what kind of rewards you're giving out. And, I think you said it, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said they start thinking of it like a dead game and really, advantage stuff doesn't matter anymore. Like nobody really cares about that anymore.
Yeah.
So when your game gets to that point, you can kind of do whatever you want. And I would like to see I think you need to reward people who have maintained a subscription. I think when you're dealing with a sub-based model, I think it's really important that you incentivize keeping your subscription going. This has been something that even in the days of like the olden days of magazine subscriptions or, subscriptions to any sort of thing, you would get some sort of long-term customer loyalty benefit, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense because subscriptions are getting harder and harder to. It's kind of funny because they're actually becoming more and more common with all these services we have, like Spotify or, I keep track of mine, and I've got 6 to 10 subscriptions active at least going on right now. And but then again, those don't. A lot of the modern ones don't offer subscription rewards or long-term subscriber rewards. So I don't know. But I think for MMOs, there's just this different mentality about subscriptions, that they're somehow archaic, they're somehow a relic of the past. So to combat that, I think probably the incentivization is needed. I just keep it simple though. Don't get crazy with it. You know, give us a I don't even
like
know
a title.
what to give
like
out.
I'd be okay with like titles,
Sure.
because that's kind of cool. You see someone that has like the title, knowing that they've been sub since like day one, but like there's just not a lot of things that I feel would fit that bill of being simple enough.
Yeah, like something that's so meaningless but also meaningful. Like, how do you do that, right? How do you find something that has no impact but is also something desirable?
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Yeah. Tough question.
Yeah.
But a good one though, Cryptfox, and I'm trying to think about where my Final Fantasy 14 account is at right now. I don't think I have too many veteran rewards, but I'm sure people in that game have like day one stuff. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well,
all right, you want to hit the next one?
Yeah, let's do the next one. So this one is from Tech Ninja. And I really like this one because it speaks to me. So it's what's the difference between creating a game like Pantheon and a game studio like Visionary Realms? So
that's a tough question.
It's a very tough question, but it's also a very relevant one because especially in the indie space, there's a lot of new studios that are on their first game. And those games, unfortunately, are often compared to games from studios that have been around for decades that have like a solidified structure and pipelines and all of these things that make the work go smoothly and efficiently. And, everyone has their place. And in that sense, those big companies are nice, right? But I think this question, I love it because I want to open up the eyes of some people. It's like, I think of it like this. So anyone that follows like Tesla technologies, you've probably heard that, they could make their first car. It wasn't too hard to make like one car, but their most technically problematic hurdles are manufacturing. So making like scaling up basically. And that's kind of how I think of it with indie to AAA studios is if you're trying to compete with a AAA studio, you're trying to make you might be able to make one component of your game extremely well crafted, but if you want to compete with the whole package, a game that a AAA studio can put out in 3 to 5 years, but you're a small studio, you're getting all your pipelines, you're getting all your, employee structure. You don't even have like people to fill every position that you want. There's all these like structural issues with building a company that goes totally alongside building a game. And so you're kind of taking on twice the load when you're a new studio building your first game. And of course, I'm talking about Visionary Realms, but I'm also talking about plenty of other games. This is a very well-known issue that has happened with like, I have to bring it up again, Star Citizen and Cloud Imperium games is they are like really struggling because they kind of exploded, first of all. So they're trying to build a company of 700 people, all of a sudden, which is its own massive challenge. And I love the direction that VR is going with this because it's just like slow and steady, right? Mm-hmm, but that's how I see like the differentiation. It's like a small studio has twice the load because they're having to set up the business side.
Yeah, I look at it this way. The tools to create games have become very democratized. Anybody can learn, Unity, learn some programming language, do something. A lot of indie studios, that's why we see all these indie studios and just games made by one or two people these days. Creating a team, obviously anybody can do that, but people might not like us or agree with this, but I feel like being a leader of a team and managing a team is way more difficult than creating a game. I mean, they're completely different skill sets, but I've worked as a sort of manager. I've been a team sort of leader, with my job. It's hard to get people all moving in the same direction and working as one in unison and keep doing that. And I think that, we think of games being created as being like, just one person, sort of dictates and says, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and it's done, right? And that's like sort of how it works. Like, it's very like there's so much more to it than that. A good team is really like its own organism, its own entity, and a good team leader is like the parent to that entity or the caretaker, and you really have to work hard. It's not easy at all to keep a team on the tracks and functioning and all that stuff. I mean, this might be like pretty basic stuff to some people, but I just think that gets simplified a lot. And the difference between making a game like Pantheon and a studio like Visionary Realms is I feel like there's just more. There's more to think about when you're creating a team, a game studio, and who's your team members, what are their roles, all this stuff. So, I think a small team like VR, whenever we see cohesion and coordination, I think that's really a credit to who they have on that team. And when we see, problems arise or delays or things that they don't achieve their milestones, I think that also is something that they need to rectify. They need to address as a team, and I would say the same thing for any team I was a part of. If I was responsible for leading a team, it's not easy. So just leave it at that.
Yeah. For sure. Great question though. Something I would like a lot of people to consider.
Absolutely, yeah. So the next one comes from Zonth, and they said, in the last stream by VR, now this question's a little old, so it wasn't the last stream, but the last stream by VR, we saw several unique weapon types. The ones that threw me off were the longer weapons, such as the long spear and the halberd. I do not believe they would put the extra effort into creating a new style of weapon to simply say the long spear does more damage than the short spear, in the same way that a one-handed axe might do less damage than a two-handed axe. I'd like to hear your thoughts around the idea that maybe what makes the long spear and the halberd special is they can hit mobs from further away. Add in the importance of climbing and verticality in Pantheon, and I don't think it's a stretch to see DPS standing on a ledge while the tank stands in the lava with the fire elemental, that kind of thing. So what they're basically asking is, do these weapons have an extra dimension of attack in terms of a greater range? And that's a really good question, and one that I would assume is true, but I don't think we can say for sure. We don't know. I don't think we've seen them demonstrated. I'm trying to think of the game streams, and I don't
think so.
Think we've seen any of the sort of like the longer spear type weapons demonstrated in action. We know there will be spears. Joppa has said it many times. It gets brought up by Zergjer quite a bit in the community because he's a big fan of spears.
Same.
But So, but in all seriousness, like I think it's really a good insight that with verticality being a thing in Pantheon, you would need that extra range, perhaps to stand on a ledge and, stab downwards or something like that. I don't know. And then again, you've also got classes that maybe don't want to be right up in the fray, in the melee at close range, and they want to be back a little bit. But, as I'm talking about this, as I'm saying this out loud, I really don't I don't know. I don't think VR is doing anything like this. What do you think?
I don't think so either. As kind of cool as some of the possibilities might be, how much issue it would introduce into like balance, and not balance in the sense of like, oh, everybody's on equal footing, but balance in the sense of like how many ways the players could cheese various systems.
Sure.
Not to mention, if they're taking into account how far a player can swing, that's just like another thing that they would have to work on with the AI. So right now, I'm sure the AI just has like this is the engage distance, this is how far away that they hit, the player, and
Right.
having to have them consider, oh, well, the player has a really long range weapon. Maybe I have to get close to them or farther away from them. And not to mention, if the player's fighting and the mob is always like just, in the normal distance, it doesn't really serve any purpose to have the longer range. So really the only reason it would be good to have the longer range would be to cheese things, So I don't really think that's a way they would go. I just don't think that's really poignant for Pantheon, for a game like Pantheon. As cool as I think halberds and long spears like are,
Right.
I just don't see
It
its
doesn't.
place in Pantheon right now.
Yeah, it feels more akin to an action game.
Oh yeah,
Than like it makes me think of New World, to be honest, because spears were such a big thing in that game. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably not something we're going to see soon. It would be a good question maybe for Dev Roundtable next time they have
Oh, yeah.
one of the devs on to ask them this question, because I think it is relevant. If they're going to create them, why not make them, or what? How are they unique? Like why would somebody want to wield a halberd over a spear? And now that I'm saying, I think Joppa did mention something about that not that long ago. He said he really enjoyed that style of a weapon, and that was his sort of weapon of choice, I guess. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
good question from Zonth.
Exactly. I wouldn't expect anything crazy, but we'll see. When they reveal it or when we see it in person.
Sure.
So we've got another question here, and this one's from Odal, so I'll just quote it. This one is coming from an issue I've had personally in MMOs. Do you have a belief that your name should suit your race and class? I've been using the same in-game name for several years, although I find it does not fit well with my class-race combo in Pantheon. Can you imagine being a paladin named Legolas, a wizard named Frodo? Yeah, you get the idea. How important to you is your name? Would you play an ogre with a Norse name or a human with an Elvish one? Kind of a thing.
I'm going to let you go. You go first. You take it.
Oh, okay. So for me, I generally like names that at least fit the world. But it's funny to say like a Norse name for a video game where there is no Norwegian region.
There's a frozen north. I mean, come on, let's
but
there's
right,
a frozen north.
but just because there's some cold place doesn't mean it has to be Norway.
Could be Canada.
Could be Canada. Maybe we have some Canadian names going around here.
Ooh, I'm gonna come up with a Canadian name for my character.
Oh man, I know this is totally off the rails, but imagine a fantasy RPG that instead of taking the typical like Norse mythology for kind of Icelandic kind of areas or cultures or whatever, instead they decided to do like North American.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that would be amazing.
There might be outrage. I don't know if that would go over that well these days.
Yeah.
But what a crazy question. First of all, in all my years of playing MMOs, I can't say that I've ever seen like people using the Lord of the Rings names like you did here with Legolas and Frodo, as non like that type of a character. Like I've never seen like a dark elf named Frodo, right? Like they just people really stay in their lanes when it comes to this stuff. When you talk about like these fantasy, like because people call themselves like this because they want to be the Elven Ranger, they want to be Legolas, right? That's why they do that. So to see somebody sort of go against that would be pretty shocking, actually. Now that I think about it. I would never do it. I mean, personally, for me, my names for my characters are, I don't go silly names, and you know, I've said this before, but like I believe my name should be reflective of my race in game. Like, so if I'm playing in an Archai, I would always try to sort of like make it somewhat Archai in nature, you know, if we don't have a language for them, and make it something that you might hear an Archai say, or a dwarf or anything like that. But yeah, no, you can only go against the grain so hard before it becomes ridiculous, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's just like to a certain extent, and I know a lot of people are gonna have their completely non-lore appropriate names in Pantheon. It's just a thing that's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's not,
so,
you know, like I can live with that. Like I can live with the non-lore appropriate names, and it's gonna happen. I don't really care. It's fine. It's just, you know, like when you get to these, like you get to these archetypes, these famous characters, and they're like, it's like an ogre, you know, named whatever, you know.
Tiny.
Can't think of one.
Sure.
No, not even Tiny, because that's not like.
I think of it as ironic, like at least as the question says, like, you know, if you did find a Darkmer named Frodo, I would laugh. I would laugh.
Yeah. So here's my challenge to chat. That if you're here for the premiere, you know, what's a iconic fantasy character in a race that you could not accept, or race, you know, like I think like Grist, you know, like Dark Elf, the picture of being a Dark Elf, you know, what, they couldn't be any other race, right? I don't know.
Well,
anyway,
it's a fun thought. It's a fun thought.
Yeah, fun thought. Let's move on. So the next one, the last one, is from Colin 104, and this one is: has VR mentioned anything about player housing? Being a player from EQ2, I see lots of people who build houses and upload them to the Housing Hall of Fame in that game. It's a very prominent piece of the community, and I would really love to see some form of housing. So unfortunately, no, Colin 104. They've said housing is not in the plans for launch for Pantheon, but maybe post-launch. I'm a big fan of housing too. I enjoyed housing in Vanguard quite a bit. That was probably where I went the furthest with housing, where I built my little house on the Kojin Islands, you know, and they had the 3 different styles of housing, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the game. But it's not a part of Pantheon right now, and it's not going to be for launch, which I'm personally glad. Even though I enjoy it, I'm glad, because I just think it's a huge undertaking, and would just completely like add so much more time to the development cycle here, I think. I know you like housing too, right, Des?
Yeah, it's funny that Colin mentioned the EQ2 system, because I do. I loved housing in EQ2. I still to this day think it's one of the best and most fleshed out housing systems in any game. But I think VR is very cognizant of what instance housing does to a game. And EQ2 is such a good example of, you know, when they released guild halls, it was almost overnight that all of the cities just became empty. So when I think of player housing in EQ2, I loved where it was. I loved the Hall of Fame, all the community events, and you know, I did so many like RP like housing setups back in the day that were just really, really cool, and people would all like go to meet, you know, at someone's house, and that was just awesome. But I think I'm okay with VR's stance on it right now. And if they can think of a way to combat the negatives and still keep a lot of that really like positive, really fun community stuff, I'd be all for it. But I also want people to be in the towns.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I mean, we don't talk about Shroud of the Avatar a lot in the MMO community, but Shroud of the Avatar is actually one of the more recent games that did they went back to old school housing style, where it was non-instance, completely like, you know, but the game was empty for other reasons, but they were still empty, you know, like there was nobody there, and they're sort of like, it just didn't go over very well. I don't think it worked out as well as they had hoped. So I don't know what the answer to, you know, I don't think the solve for that problem has really been found yet, but
yeah,
maybe somebody in chat knows, maybe somebody listening knows.
Yeah. So it's a tough one, but I'm sure they'll figure it out.
Yeah. And that's the mailbox. So yeah, thanks to everyone for submitting their questions. And if you want to contribute a question, like I said, join the Discord, check the Rewind Questions channel, and throw it in there. So until next time, that's the mailbox. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
So this week's community discussion is going to be about swords. Well, not specifically swords, I guess, but definitely about gear. Actually, it's how to make gear more than just a kind of, like that more stats equals more better when it comes to what you might call like a legendary or artifact equipment. So we're getting this from a post on the official forums, and it's titled Sentient Swords from user OmegaBeam. And I'll quote the post here. This post asks, will there be sentient weapons with their own intelligence, will, ego, etc.? What exactly encompasses an artifact tier item? Just the attack and damage and a few bonuses? Most MMOs follow a linear algorithm handling weapon and item grade. The higher or the rarer the item, the more stat boost, attack, damage, and gear score. I would love to see Pantheon rise above this mundane feature and integrate sentient items for the highest, legendary tiered items. They also mention an example from Forgotten Realms with a sword named Ghaldassii, I believe. And and it sounds kind of like the wielder would have to seek out a greater power to fight the will of the blade or risk loss of the sword or even their own death. So basically, I guess the idea is that for the really special stuff that's supposed to be like legendary or whatever, there should be more to it than just stat boost or a simple proc. Right? Like, and
I'm curious. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, the example in this post is like that sentient item, which I think of like cursed items of D&D and stuff, but I'm sure a lot of people have minor examples of this. But I do want to point out before we get into it that VR's philosophy on a lot of weapons, we're all about like item importance and everything. Isn't that linear stat scaling generally, right? Because they want people to hold on to weapons for a long time or gear in general. Sorry, I keep saying weapons, but and so I think this might actually be kind of in line with something they might consider. So but yeah, what's going on in your head?
Well, so first of all, like what do they mean by sentient? Like how does that function in the game? Like, what does that mean? Does the sword talk to you? Does the sword, if you put it in the bank, will it eventually get up and walk out of the bank on its own? How would that function as a game feature is my first question. Like, I love the idea. First of all, I love the idea because there was a sentient sword in Baldur's Gate 2. Don't remember the name of it, but they did it again in Pillars of Eternity 2. I think it was just in 2. I don't think there was one in 1, but definitely 1 in 2, where the sword basically is a character in your party. You wield it and you use it as a weapon, but it is a character in your party. It talks to you. There's a storyline involved with it. It has a whole thing. It has desires and needs. So
yeah.
I love that idea. So I mean, if you transpose that onto an MMO, I think that could be really fun. I think that would be really fun. You just basically you're making weapons into NPCs. Does it mean that these are the top of the line things, or does this just mean it's not a random, but like it can be applied to a 1 to 10 level item? There's one kicking around in the 20s somewhere.
Yeah.
What's the advantage of it? Like, it's not just about being better. Sentient doesn't necessarily mean better. It doesn't have to anyway. It could, but it doesn't have to. So, like, is this the kind of thing you would want? Is there maybe a downside to having a sentient weapon? Or is it just they're always going to be better in some way because of the growth potential maybe, or what they can do if you treat them like a party member? I love this kind of idea. I love this idea, but it's so like undefined, I guess. That I have trouble seeing how it might be applied.
Well, let's get into some of the examples that were given in the thread, and I just grabbed a few from Nocturnal Demise and OmegaBeam. So they gave a few examples besides the /say, like sentience kind of a thing that we've seen in a few games where they just say some flavor text, but also, for example, like leveling up the weapon or hitting certain milestones, like the weapon desires you to kill a certain amount of orcs or something. Having a sort of companion quest to find its history and unlock its potential. Passing a kind of lore check, like using the perception system to learn what it likes and what it doesn't like. And
now we're talking.
Yeah. Or even like in the case of like a weapon, maybe depending on how you treat the weapon or, whatever variable there is, it could change the blade from being holy to unholy or stuff like that. And then lastly, I kind of like this one. This is a spin on the flavor text, and it says maybe the piece of gear or the weapon or whatever will do different /say like flavor text depending on what area you're in, like especially if it has to do with its history. Like if it's taken into a place that maybe it was in the hands of a fallen warrior, it would say, oh, like we should not be here, or like little things like that. And
can the entire party hear the sword talking?
Because I would assume that it would go in like /say, just like flavor text, right? Okay. Like so, yeah. So it wouldn't be coming from your mouth. It would be just in the same kind of channels that you would see like an NPC talk or something. And
so people would be telling me to tell my bow to shut up all the time.
And that does come up in the thread. It totally does. It's like, if you have something that talks, you want to be able to tell it to not. But like, I don't know, that's kind of part of it too. But
/report bow.
But then the last example here, which I think ties into one thing that you brought up, was like maybe even certain legendary like weapons, or let's just use the sword as an example, could operate kind of like a pet, which I think that's a pretty unique idea. It would be like awesome to see a warrior with a great sword that's like literally flying around on its own, I think of like Alucard from Castlevania, like it just kind of like is commanded, but it does its thing, these are all like kind of wild examples, right? But I think the general idea is that like we're so tired of the just stats, differentiating an item. Like we need something else.
Somebody, I think in the original post said, you look at stats and gear score. I am so sick of gear score. Gear score needs to die in a fire.
I know.
Not even like come back, because it's just so. I just cannot stand it. It takes all the fun out of it. So stop with gear score. Once that's gone, then we can have a real conversation.
I think we're good
gear
in
score
Pantheon.
Just overrides everything.
I'm pretty sure we've ousted.
Been playing too many bad MMOs lately. Indeed.
But yeah, I think the idea of some kind of horizontal progression, yes, I'm going to use that term, alongside your gear, I think is just so freaking valuable. And I'm a big proponent, and I know a lot of people in the community are going to disagree with me on this, but there's so many things. Just having levels in an MMO inadvertently pushes people to just go for max level. There's just no way around it, right? But
it's true.
I'm actually a fan of gating, in the sense of easiest example, and again, people are going to disagree, but is the class quests in EQ2, where you had level 10, you had to finish something, you had to do something memorable to choose your class and continue progressing. Same at level 20. And a lot of people complained about that because they end up, they want their like 7 alts, and they don't like having to go through that on every character. But when it comes down to it, no matter how Pantheon is made, it has levels, and people are going to want to just plow straight through everything to get to max level first, because there's no downside to it. You're always more powerful at the end of the game, and you can always just go back and mow down everything that you missed. And so when I think of horizontal progression, I think of stuff like this. Like, I'll use one of the examples. Let's say you get a weapon at level 30 in, a cave or something, and let's say it's got a freaking vendetta against gnolls or something, and like a specific tribe of gnolls, and either being sentient or, through a quest line discovering, the identity of this blade, you go out and have to kill specific gnolls. And sorry. Well, I would say you should only get credit if you can get XP for the kill. And if you wanted to progress this weapon, which might be extremely powerful for quite a long time, you would have to go to a specific location and do something specific during the time that you're in that bracket, because you could technically miss out. And again, I know people have that FOMO. They want to be able to do literally everything in the game, but if there's not mechanics in place that at least encourage you to slow down and not just blast through the content and then redo it later, I think we're going to run into the same thing that we see in a lot of games, which is that typical progression. And so having something that goes horizontally from that to maybe make the most out of a weapon or a piece of gear, I think is really, really important. And all of these ideas, I think, lend themselves to that idea of maybe we just have these really special items, whether it's endgame or not, that aren't just stat sticks, that they have something special and memorable about them, even if they're not the best at the end of the game. I think it's just so important, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Really good point. Really well said. It's a really good rant, but it's true though. I mean, we're look at modern MMOs. Look at Lost Ark. We just played this on Tuesday. Games, and it's a Korean game, so it's definitely there's going to be grind involved. But any real MMO, they build so much grind into it just because we're content locusts, and we for the despite our better natures, we are fast to get through stuff, and you have to put in these kinds of things. So I think that there's a lot of systems that are put in just specifically to slow people down, but they're not always the best systems. A good system like this that has creativity involved and has, some character and some, it's unique, or at least it's not common, is valuable. So I support things like this, and it may seem like, it's sort of a crazy idea and stuff like that, but it's interesting and it serves a purpose. So, I know when you were saying about pets, about warriors having a weapon as a pet,
my gosh, yeah.
I was thinking in my head, I'm hearing like the team at VR going, oh my God, please no more summoned things. We can't deal with summoned things right now anyway. Down the road, maybe. But
network stuff, after all that, man, if it operates as good as it's supposed to, and I used warrior, but you think of anything with like a secondary item that just kind of like does its own thing that the whole group gets to see, and it's like special,
Yeah. So if you've got a sword and it's walking beside the group and talking to us and going out and pulling things for the group, then I'm all for it. So it's a good idea. I really enjoy this, and I'd love to see like this idea put into a game. If it's not Pantheon, put it in in any MMO. I'd love to give it a shot.
It's just about being unique. I think that's kind of what it all comes down to. Is the numbers. It works for some people. Some people will play an entire game just for the numbers, but we're trying to make memories. We want this game to have stories that we can look at 10, 15, 20 years later and be like, oh my gosh, that crazy like level 25 sword that like becomes sentient when you finish the quest, and it follows you around, and it randomly, like, let's say, like really hates a specific mob type, and it will just aggro that mob if it ever sees it. Like, you remember when, we were going through the dungeon and we had no idea that mob was in there, and then it just ran off and did this thing, and like silly stuff like that. And again, this is a lot more development stuff. This isn't super easy to put in, but again, if they have the systems in place to be creative with the tools they have, I see this as totally possible if they set their minds to it. And man, would it create some memories,
I think this sounds like a good expansion, maybe a mini expansion. The rise of the sentient weapons. Well, that's what they can call it.
But in that same vein, though, then it's like, oh well, like everyone, it's like an expected thing, and a big deal for me is that you don't have to do it.
Sure,
is that let's say you don't care about leveling up your helmet or whatever that feasts on the souls of ghosts or spirits or whatever, and you're just like, man, it's not worth it for me. I'm just gonna go do this other content. That's important for me, because you do that, you get to the end game, and then you go, your buddy's got the helmet, they did the time, they did the thing, and they get to put the helmet on, and it does, whatever special thing that indicates that they did that content. It's all about just shaking it up. I'd rather just have so much variation than have the same stat sticks and gear that we've always, it's just not enough for me anymore. I don't know.
That's exactly. It's not enough for me anymore either. For people that have been playing these games for far too long, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. Well, just to bring it in a little bit, because this isn't all like upsides, and there's more to the negative side than just development time. And Dorothea and Grimseath kind of point this out, and because Lord of the Rings Online has legendary weapons that people kind of just get and they just hold on to. And the downside of that is, you get kind of stuck in a certain piece of gear, right? I think of EQ2 when they put the epics in, and it was just like, that's just the best. It's just the best item, except in very specific situations. And, they kept trying to make it add, extra epic steps so that it's more relevant and, further expansions. And it's like, I know a lot of people don't want to just have the same gear for years, right? So there's a bit to think about there.
Yeah. I just, legendaries, have always been a part of the equation going back to EverQuest. Or epics, I guess, in those days. But still, it's what makes them legendary? Is it the stats, or is it because they're a cool thing that, like you said, a helm that has a appetite for souls and gets a crazy power once you've consumed enough of it? That's interesting and cool. And stats aren't cool anymore. Stats aren't enough anymore.
Yeah, and I think the natural kind of comeback to that argument would be like, well, if we have items that are just always good for every scenario, I think VR has not delivered on some of its vision.
And so you don't want that.
I think of Mana Stone or something, where it's like maybe a little bit more specialized than Mana Stone, but maybe there's just something that works really well for this specific thing. You put the time in, you get the results, and you can hold on to that and use it when it's needed, not use it when it's not needed, and that way it's not.
An interesting and cool effect doesn't necessarily have to be powerful.
True,
right?
Absolutely. It could just be fun.
Yeah. There was plenty of stuff in EverQuest that was just interesting effects. It wasn't necessarily good. Some of you didn't want, right? There was some effects that were that caused fear. You didn't want your fear thing proccing when you were surrounded by stuff, and they run off in every direction and pulled the whole dungeon on you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be good. It has to be interesting and fun and, feel good when you use it, or when it not feel good when you use it, but there's gotta be something entertaining about it.
Yeah. Something that sticks with you. And it made me think of, there's a ring in EQ2 that it gives you a 60% speed boost, but it also randomly fears you. I love stuff like that. I love
right.
stuff like that.
The good and the bad. You take the good and take the bad.
Just like D&D, man. Anyway, this is a great topic, and it gets my ticker ticking. Thank you so much for posting that, OmegaBeam. But I think we should wrap it up for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, hate to say it, but again, not a lot going on for the Spotlight this week. No public introductions, hint, hint. No new fan fiction that I know of, and I don't know, is there any new art?
No, I don't think so. I'll check in with Crowsinger when I'm putting this all together, but
okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, anyway, I mean, at least we've got some video content, and boy, we've got some really good stuff. So Baz did a huge solid to me. I know this wasn't meant for me, but I'm very thankful. With the help of BitCrunch, put together this massive video explaining the network stack and just like kind of putting it into just pretty much as easy to understand terms and analogies that you can ever ask for. And I mean, I can't stress enough how great this video is if you just want to try to understand what the network stack is and how it plays into Pantheon's development. It's kind of funny because I'm sure there are some parts that still seem a little like daunting in spite of being broke down so well. But I mean, hey guys, that's it's kind of the point. This stuff is a lot more complex than a lot of people think. And so just remember that. And this is pretty much as simple as it gets. But
that video is really important. Like, just it's a well done. Baz always does a great job, but it's a very important video for the Pantheon community to watch because it just puts everything in perspective and so informative. And like Bazgrim is getting really, really. He's always been good at it, but he's getting better at these kind of instructional informational videos like this. So I learned a lot just watching it.
Yeah. And you could tell like so much work went into it. And so it just did a great job, Baz. So I'm super happy you made this video so I don't have to. But also we've got Nathan NAPALM did a video on the Ghaldassii ruins. I actually just missed this one from last weekend. I think it was actually posted on Saturday. So, I might be a little late, but
it's quite good. No, yep. Nathan does a great job, and cheers to him.
He always gets my blood pumping,
Yep.
And again, we've got Simurgh did another Pantheon video, and this one's called Let's Talk Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. The Keeper is Calling. And this time he jumps into a few different sources, like mostly the producer's letter, and just gives his take on a lot of stuff in there. But what's really cool about this one is you get to really see his like growing enthusiasm for the game as he starts to find out more things about it, and like connecting like D&D and Pantheon's like things that they're going for, and you could see his excitement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when anybody comes into the community and you see that first sort of like, oh wow, so what's going on here?
It's so fun.
That's always exciting to see, right?
Yeah, so we get to like see it in real time as Simurgh like puts out more and more videos. So definitely go check out the video. Maybe leave a nice comment for him. Maybe encourage him to jump in with us. But yeah. So lastly, this isn't video content, but I want to do a different kind of shout out to a content creator that isn't technically in the Pantheon space yet. So if anyone was following New World throughout development, there was a really high quality content creator that made, like, in my opinion, some of the best videos for the game as it was like pre-launch. And he was also probably the only content creator that put out a ton of videos trying to dive in and pick apart the lore and all that stuff. And also he just kept a really level head about the game in general, including, disappointment and concerns. So like if any of that rings a bell, you may know who I'm talking about. And this is this guy named Sir Medieval. So over the last few years, I've felt like his desires for MMORPGs, as I've watched his videos, seem to just super align with Pantheon, but I never saw him actually mention Pantheon. So Anyway, long story short, he posted this on Twitter the other day. This is from Sir Medieval. It says, really hoping either Corepunk or Pantheon MMO hit some type of playable state this year. So far looking most forward to Nightingale, but the MMORPG genre has grown increasingly stale for fresh choices, and just following the herd around from game to game just sounds very uninteresting. So definitely seems that he's got his eye on Pantheon. And I'm really excited to see that. At least to some degree he follows the project. And I don't personally think it's time quite yet for Pantheon to just get thrust into the big news spotlight. I mean, he's not massive, but he's got 55,000 subscribers and but
yeah, bigger channel.
Yeah, but really he's such a excellent catch. He's super chill. Yeah, he's just totally got co vibes. It's perfect, man.
Yeah, more co is a good thing.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I just wanted to kind of shout shout that out. I put a link to the tweet in the show notes, and I don't think this is a big deal. I just wanted to shout it out because, again, seems really perfect, and I'm glad he's got his eye on it. But maybe go in there, say hi, welcome. I'm excited too, kind of a thing.
Yep.
Anyway, that is it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. So last week, we learned about the arrival of the Scar, the Gnomes, and the Halflings during the frail age of Terminus. This week, the tale focuses on the humans and how their plight took center stage for a period during this age. Descended deities, war wizards, and inspirational speeches form the centerpiece of this week's telling. So turn the lamp down low as I read the words of Pantheon's amazing lead writer, Mr. J.N. Gerhardt, in this week's lore segment. It is perhaps wise to briefly return the narrative to Vesu and King Avendir, whose vision for what his people must become was said to be crystallized in that hour on the aloof island. For there is no figure who so altered the future of his own race, or Terminus at large, than the human leader. Even before he set foot on Vesu, his frontline leadership in the many battles leading up to Kadra Hor had more than won the respect of his contemporaries. Compared to their zenith today, the humans had barely set foot upon the hills of Kingsreach when the Revenants struck for Havensong and Fairthale, and yet they were perhaps the most ruthlessly targeted. When the war was finally over, even their runes had been taken from them and carted off a cliff by a member of their own Pantheon. They were a nation of homeless victors, with no tokens of their history, save for the memories in their hearts. Nevertheless, since founding Thronefast on the northern coast of the Bethrael Sea, no kingdom has moved so dauntlessly from survival to flourishing since that time as the humans. Within days, Avendir sent riders across the region to secure modest but useful alliances with eventual partners in trade, even pledging their military and engineers in support of rebuilding. This carried great weight amongst the fledgling nations and garnered loyalties which endure even to this day. But his first act was to construct 2 arches from the dredged wreckage of Havensong. One signifying death, the other life. It is said that to approach the people of Thronefast as a friend, you must share in the trial of their past, in form at least. Though I must reveal I have an entire volume of accounts from those who say they have felt the very sting of death and the pain of a birth as they passed unsuspecting through this homage to the human travail. This purposeful approach to architecture defined Avendir's vision for his brethren, believing a city magnificent to the eye would inspire the citizens of it and yield the respect of visitors to it. The ascension of Thronefast in commerce, wealth, and stability has endured as the greatest pillar propping up the tent under which all other races could progress. When Avendir died in 525, he was mourned on no less than half a dozen continents. There were 2 voids left immediately following the Deicide War, one of mercy and one of lament. The first void was the abdication of the war wizards, which is almost forgotten now, but no less important to acknowledge. Though their namesake is crude, especially in light of the exponential debt every succeeding generation owes their order, it has fallen into a common usage among the races in favor of the worshipful Sons of Terminus. It is a precious grace that none of the war wizards chose to use their unrivaled strength for rule, for we know not if they were so forbidden. Just one of the 5 could have risen above all the broken kingdoms within years, if not months. Any alliances so formed would have bent the imbalance even further, likely sparking another revolution of intercontinental war from which Terminus may not have recovered. So while they were deliriously sought after, none were found in any real way. Many impostors came after them, and many still do. Every few years, a crazed magician in the Middle Realms claims he was sent from the dark side of the sun or some such madness. I am thankful this is all merely an irritating footnote, however. It is worth mentioning that I found no record of any of the original 5 sons passing away. Perhaps they still endure, simply not among us. And that is the lore you know. And that brings us to the end of episode 91. Desrin, as always, thank you so much for your companionship and your excellent co-hosting abilities and bringing these discussions that you bring. They're always so interesting. And I look forward to all our discussions each and every week.
Yeah, fun episode this week. Can't wait till next week. Have plenty to talk about always.
Right. So start of the month next week for the show, for episode 92. Thanks again, everyone, for hanging out with us. Check the links in the show notes and the video description to get the content that we've discussed. And again, have a great weekend. We will see you next time.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.